Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and good morning to you. I'd like to greet the honourable members of SCOAG and the ladies and gentlemen that are on the line, and of course my colleagues from Team AGSA. Chair, you begin by recognizing and acknowledging our recent appointment as the external auditors of UNESCO. We're particularly thrilled about this appointment and for all the reasons you mentioned. And I've no doubt that the members of Team AGSA who've understood the sector only too well over many years of investment will deliver significant value to UNESCO and its broad range of stakeholders and do us all proud. I'd like to thank the committee and the honourable members for making the time and creating this platform for Team AGSA to share the work that we've done on PFMA. The audits of provincial and national departments as well as the legislatures for the year ended the 31st of March 2023, those audits have been completed. The individual reports have been tabled together with the annual reports of the respective auditees, and they've already been the subject of oversight engagements within Parliament, but also within the provincial legislatures. What we've done is consolidate the results, to analyze them, and to compile this report that we are tabling today, as we have done in the past. And it is my privilege today, together with the Deputy Auditor General, as well as members of the executive team, to share with the committee the work of Team AGSA. Consistent with our mission and vision, which you know, we have conducted these audits with the utmost professionalism, with independence still the guardrail for everything we do, but with an eye for ensuring that we do add value into the systems of governance, the systems of oversight, accountability, and transparency. We have ensured that, as provided by the Public Audit Act, and specifically Section 20, the annual regularity audits that we conduct include an independent assessment and an independent confirmation of credibility on financial statements, on performance information, that is a service delivery report, and also indicating whether or not key laws and regulations relating to financial and performance management have indeed been complied with. In conducting our audits, our approaches have been informed by the Culture Shift 2030 strategy, which you are aware of, through which we aim to make a more direct, more consistent impact on the culture of public institutions, driving them towards organizational cultures that are characterized by performance, transparency, accountability, and institutional integrity. A key foundation of all of our audit messages over the last couple of years is the accountability ecosystem, through which we communicate that there are different role players or actors in the public sector accountability ecosystem, each of them with a distinct role, whether it is at a leadership or decision-making level or at a support, intervention, or oversight level. What's crucial is that they all be effective in their respective roles and they operate in a way that's complementary. We are absolutely convinced that if each of these role players does play their role effectively, there will be a vast improvement in the performance, in the accountability, in the transparency, and in the strength of public institutions right across South Africa and as envisaged in the Constitution. To get to the overall audit outcomes, we are reporting on a total of 418 auditees of the audits that we completed. The PFMA cycle includes other smaller auditees which we do not include in this analysis. For today's analysis, we've taken just the GR relevant PFMA auditees as well as the legislatures. Let's start with the good news first. The number of clean audits has increased quite significantly, and I think that's quite important. If you're looking at a PFMA cycle that looks after an expenditure budget of 3.1 trillion rand together, it's useful to see at least 35% of these auditees achieving the clean audit status. Commendable that 110 of them have been able to sustain clean audits over the past year, so they got a repeat clean audit. At least 53 of them have had a clean audit over the last 4 years. So that tells you that there are institutions that have maintained quality systems of transparency and accountability, that are able to put their financials together, that are able to put a performance report that is credible and reliable, and that have got key systems and disciplines that ensure that they operate within the rule of law. The next category is the number of unqualified opinions with findings. These are auditees where their financial statements have been confirmed to be credible, but they do have a problem either on performance information and or compliance. If you look at the 35% and the 39% of auditees that together make up 74% of the PFMA, where 74% of the auditees in PFMA were able to put credible financial statements. It's an important platform on which we can build. The auditees that are in the PFMA cycle have got fewer and fewer audits with modified audit opinions. So the qualified, the adverse with findings, the disclaimers, fewer and fewer of those over time. And I think it's important for us to take note that this trend of improvement has been coming over the last 4 years, consistently and even more rapidly over the past year. The only real blemish on this particular slide is the 31 outstanding audits, and they're outstanding because they've not been completed for one reason or the other. And I will touch on that in the next slide, because I think that is something that we need to ensure that gets the type of attention it deserves. But on the whole, very good performance on audit outcomes throughout the PFMA cycle. And as I said, with improvements that are visible right across the provinces and in the national sphere of government. On the next slide, we set out, and quite deliberately, an analysis of the audits that are outstanding. It could look like a busy slide, but all it is just to indicate to the honourable members a couple of messages. The first is that, as at the cut-off date for our analysis, which is the 30th of September, there were a number of audits that remained uncompleted. And there are different reasons for that. Some of the reasons are that there's a delay in the audit process, such as the local government seat. Some of them relate to disputes, technical disputes on audit matters, such as the Department of Health in Limpopo. If you look at the Railway Safety Regulator, a similar issue. So there are those anomalies in the audit processes, and we do consider it important for us to give space to finish these issues, close out on the technical dispute, and also give every auditee the best chance of finalizing their audit properly. So those are not quite the problem. There are some auditees that we were able to finish their audits in the meantime. So out of the 31 that were outstanding, we were able to finish 9 auditees, and that's on the right-hand side of your slide, and you'll see the outcomes there. Some of them were unqualified at the time that we finished their audits. Some of them were qualified, and others were disclaimed with disclaimed audit opinions. So we were able to finish those audits. There are instances where financials are submitted late. And here I would like to highlight that middle block where you'll see Alex Corps. For the last 2 years, they submit their financials late. You'll see PRASA. For the last 3 years, they submit their financials late. And then Talet or TVET College submit their financials late over the last 5 years. The law is very clear on the need for accounting officers and accounting authorities to submit their financials on time, and just as it is clear for the AG to complete its audits on time, so that those audits and their audit reports can end up in the legislatures and in the parliamentary system, so that they can be scrutinized and accountability processes take place. So when there is lateness on a repeated basis, it starts to compromise transparency and accountability in a way that should worry us all. And if you look at an entity such as PRASA, with the significant budget and the significant impact of its operations on the lived experiences of South Africans, it's crucial that it does get into the oversight mechanisms for proper engagement for accountability reasons. There are instances where financials are not submitted, such as the group of SAA, which we know has been through business rescue, similar issues at Denel, as well as the Northwest Transport Investment Group. In this last block at the bottom, I would like to call the attention of the honourable members to key auditees whose financials have not been submitted, and year after year they do miss the accountability cycle within Parliament. Specifically, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the Compensation Fund, NISFAS. Over many years now, there's a struggle on making sure that their audits are completed on time, their financials are submitted on time. I believe that NISFAS, their audit report, has now been tabled in Parliament as of yesterday. But the point I'm making here is that when we give these outcomes and that category of outstanding is there, please do pay particular attention on what it says about transparency and accountability lapses amongst those auditees. And it is for that reason that we share this information in the presentation today, as well as in our general report. Just in terms of some analysis of the audit outcomes themselves, if you look at each and every one of the provinces there, you'll see that over the last 4 years of this administration, every single province has improved its audit outcomes. Significant improvements in the Eastern Cape, where they now have a high number of clean audits, at 12 clean audits that have been attained over the course of this administration. And that is the outcome of consistent focus over this term of this administration, as well as a strong tone from the top of that leadership team that insisted that there be attention to improve audit outcomes. The gains that have been made, we are calling for them to be sustained, and we are also calling for them to be translated into the bigger departments, the bigger budgets, such as the Department of Education, Department of Health, who are still lagging behind the improvement trend. But nonetheless, a very, very good outcome. Even if you look at the Free State, fewer and fewer modified audit opinions, with more unqualified audit opinions than we've seen for a long time. Gauteng is a province that has also seen significant, and that is the result of sustained effort by the accounting officer over many years of working towards this. It's one of those auditees that reminds us that clean audits don't happen in a flash. It takes years of focusing on the right things. KZN also has demonstrated significant gains in terms of improvements on their audit outcomes, but also in terms of the number of clean audits that they've also attained. Again, also the result of a leadership team within the administration over many years now that has focused on driving the right sort of tone and the right sort of support. The list goes on in terms of the number of improvements. If you look at the Western Cape, they retain the top number of clean audits at 18. But for the first time, they're not too much of an outlier if you look at the other provinces, which is encouraging because it tells us that all the provinces are moving in the right direction. And the national sphere of government, also significant improvement over the last 4 years, which has been sustained in this year as well. If I move now to what we've analyzed as high impact auditees, this will look somewhat unfamiliar to the honorable members. Over many years, we would have reported on what we called key service delivery departments, and we pulled those out for analysis. This time around, we've done it slightly differently. We looked at entire sectors and we said, if you look at the value chain of health services, yes, look at the departments of health, but also look at other entities that support that initiative. If you look at higher education and training, skills development and employment, look at the entire ecosystem and value chain of how that works. And we've put all of those as high impact auditees. So within these 193 high impact auditees, they look after all of these key service delivery areas that we've listed on the slide. And they look after 85% of the expenditure budget together. We've pulled them out so that we can analyze them slightly differently, because we believe that if we can attend to those, we'll be able to translate the gains we're making in the number of clean audits, the number of improving audit outcomes, to improved reality of experienced service delivery on the ground. What this slide tells you is that if you compare the high impact auditees to the other auditees, it is the high impact ones, the high budget ones, that are lagging behind the improvement trend. It is the smaller entities that get more clean audits. It's the smaller effort placed on these high impact auditees if we are to translate all the work that's going into improving audit outcomes into the lived reality of citizens. The legislature sector, which is not governed by the PFMA, but rather by the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act, FAMPLA, we've pulled out for analysis for a particular reason. Well, first of all, they operate under a different dispensation. But if we look at that sector, we believe that it's crucial that every single legislature attains a clean audit, because then they can speak with authority when they exercise oversight on departments and entities within their domain. They have a particularly important role to ensure that they oversee executive action, that they perform specific oversight functions that relate to various aspects of government operations. It is these legislatures that must ensure that government is accountable for its decisions and is transparent in its dealings, and that government is responsive. So it's important that they lead by example. Pleasing to note that there have been significant improvements in the outcomes of the legislature sector. Out of the 9 legislatures plus the National Parliament, 9 clean audits and only 1, which is in the Northwest, that is lagging behind the improvement trend. But I think a very pleasing outcome, because it says that at least 9 of the legislatures can now genuinely lead by example in terms of transparency and accountability. And that brings with it the authority that's necessary to hold others accountable. The next slide deals with an analysis of the state-owned enterprises. Here we've pulled out the entities that are listed in Schedule 2 of the PFMA. On that list, there are 21 entities. If you take out Telkom, which is not in our mandate, and you take out SA Express, which has been liquidated, you get to 19. Out of those 19, the AGSA audits 15 directly. However, we've included on the slide the outcomes of the 4 that we don't audit, being Eskom, the IDC, Broadband Infraco, as well as ATNS. They are the air traffic controller, air traffic navigation services, I beg your pardon. The outcomes for these 19 Schedule 2 entities, which are the ones that have got significant budgets, significant responsibilities, but also the ability to attract and remunerate talent to conduct their affairs. These outcomes indicate that there's significant work to be done if we are to improve the strength, the integrity, the transparency, and even performance of these institutions. You got one clean audit in this sector, and that is the DBSA. And DBSA has maintained its clean audit outcome for a number of years now. If we consider what we know about the performance of the DBSA, which is generally very good, and we consider the stability of the board of DBSA, which is pretty stable, and we consider that over the last year they've had a change of CEO with a well-ordered, predictable leadership shift. Story about how entities should be operating with stability and with ongoing excellence. You can match transparency and accountability with performance. DBSA for us tells a story that the things they keep professing as being necessary in every public institution are not just desirable, but they're also attainable. Most of the state-owned entities operate in the area of unqualified with findings. That means that they can get their debits and credits correct. However, they struggle with performance information and particularly with compliance, especially in the area of procurement management and supply chain management. There are 2 with qualified audit outcomes and 2 with disclaimed audit outcomes. The ones that were outstanding when we completed our analysis, you would know that the SAA group, those audits are now the subject of engagement within Parliament, with our team having continued to catch up with now that the financials have been submitted. And Eskom was also completed subsequently and tabled in Parliament as well. I'd like to move on now to an area of relating to performance information, but I'll start with just some background of why we've done what we've done, because our report this time around, honourable members, will look somewhat different from what you've seen. And I think that's important to note, because if we're talking about a PFMA sector, that is able to get the debits and credits right. 74% of them can account for financial resources. It does give us the opportunity to strengthen our own insight on what happens on the delivery side. Over the years, we've reported audit findings and weaknesses in the management of infrastructure projects. We've also raised findings on the lack of preventative infrastructure maintenance, which affects the delivery of services. And these findings and concerns were evident in different sectors at national and provincial level. This time, we decided as Team AGSA to dig deeper, to try and understand the problems and to understand their root causes better, so that we could offer richer insight to the people that have been appointed as the stewards of the relevant institutions and the relevant resources. Team AGSA spent significant time on projects in education, in health, in human settlements, in the water sector, in transport, as well as looking at projects in key government buildings. The projects were inspected by multidisciplinary audit teams, so you didn't have financially trained auditors going to inspect projects on their own. The investment that we've been making over a number of years, as the honourable members know, has been about diversifying our skill set and ensuring that we do have experts that walk with us and these teams went to visit many projects right across the country, and right in different provinces. They also were able to select projects because we audit the provinces, we audit national departments, but we also audit different entities. So here you have the benefit of an AGSA that audits the entire sphere of government and is able to look at things across institutions. We've deepened our understanding of what goes wrong in projects across the project lifecycle: planning, project implementation, project management, as well as commissioning of projects. Some insight on the things that we found as we went about looking at projects. In the 2023 audit year, we visited no less than 137 infrastructure projects across the country, looking at those sectors that I spoke about a minute ago. And the projects we looked at also included those projects where the departments of public works and infrastructure were responsible as implementing agents. So at least 67 of these projects related to instances where the departments of infrastructure and public works were engaged. Our audit work incorporated site visits to inspect progress and to look at the quality of projects. In 112 instances, 82% of the projects we found, there were problems. And these problems were either projects were delayed, or there were cost overruns, or construction already been completed. And on this slide, we share with you a couple of examples, but our report does detail quite a lot more examples. Not all of them, but a lot more examples, which I would invite the honourable members to read, to give you a sense of the type of things we found. In the Northwest, the Department of Public Works was responsible for a project at Lirutweng Primary School. There we found delays, cost overruns, and quality issues. The story goes that the construction of the school commenced in December of 2016, with a planned completion date of January 2020. In September 2020, after spending 12.69 million rand, the contract of this initial contractor was terminated due to poor quality workmanship. And since then, a replacement contractor has still not been appointed, and the project has been stopped due to ongoing legal disputes between the department and the first contractor. During our site visit in March 22 and in June 2023, we observed substandard construction work. Walls were collapsing in the same direction, which the quantity surveyors and engineers will tell you means that the walls were simply not strong enough to resist the wind. Significant remedial work will therefore have to be taken on, with increased costs and further delay in the completion of the school. And as a result, what you have is that despite the initial appropriation of funding and the initial allocation of responsibility to do this. The learners that should have been benefiting from this project are not. They still have to contend with overcrowding in their classrooms, which ultimately affects the quality of learning. There are a number of other examples in the report, and I do hope that you will find it useful. The impact of what we've seen is that these delays not only increase costs and result in financial losses at a time when we can least afford it, they result in compromised lived experience of people, learners in overcrowded classrooms, ablution facilities that do not work within schools, such that sanitation services are not there, and the dignity that should be afforded to learners is not there. You've got residents that end up drinking unsafe water because the water infrastructure projects have not been completed on time and at the right quality. You've got insufficient road and rail infrastructure for public and for freight transport. With delivery of housing, we've seen in the human settlement sector, there are average delays of 45 months on projects. You've got government buildings that go unattended in terms of maintenance, where those projects, money is appropriated, budgets are spent, and yet those projects are delayed by, on average, 46 months. We've also looked at, as I said, health and education, but also at the water sector. All this work was done such that we could understand what goes wrong, what are the root causes to these problems. And what we've come back with remains things we've said before: lack of proper needs assessments and feasibility studies, and actually sticking to what those studies reveal, lack of coordination amongst the different players within a project, lack of accountability of holding contractors accountable when they don't perform. But we've also seen that there's still an opportunity for improved monitoring and enforcement by the regulatory bodies that are responsible within the infrastructure sphere. Instances where things do go well. And so what we've seen is that the presidency, working with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, as well as Infrastructure South Africa, the entity that was set up, especially in the projects to deliver student accommodation within the higher education sector. In these projects, these three projects that are on your screen right now, you'll see that the expenditure came in within budget. The dates of completion were as had been planned, and the quality of what was delivered was consistent with what had been initially committed to. We're not convinced that it's an accident that these projects were being managed by the DBSA, who were key implementing agents and key partners in the steering committee meetings that allowed a discipline for ongoing monitoring of these projects, from planning into execution right until commissioning. So what we know is that it is possible for these projects to run properly if those disciplines are put in place. The next slide, I think, will interest the honourable members, but I'd like to frame it by saying that the work we do as AGSA on performance information has led us to an even stronger conviction that it is quality performance information that sits between South Africa and delivery of services, between South Africa and the realization of our ambitions. Here's a case in point. The National Department of Health has developed the Ideal Clinic Initiative, which is now being called the Ideal Clinic Realization and Maintenance Program. And this program defines 10 components and another set of subcomponents and elements which must be present and be seen for a fully functional primary health care facility that can be regarded as ideal. And this initiative was launched in 2013 to address the deficiencies in the quality of primary health care services in South Africa, and to lay a strong foundation for the implementation of the National Health Insurance Scheme in pursuit of our ambitions on universal healthcare coverage, which does depend on a well-functioning public primary healthcare system, which is an entry point into the healthcare system for many patients. In order to achieve this, Primary healthcare facilities should be functioning optimally, and thus requiring a combination of elements to be present in order to render them to be ideal. An ideal clinic has been defined as one that has got good infrastructure, adequate staff, adequate medicine and supplies, good administrative processes, and sufficient bulk supplies that use applicable clinical policies, protocols, and guidelines. And all this to ensure that there is a provisioning of quality healthcare services to the community. The 2019 to 2024 Medium-Term Strategic Framework, the MTSF, included an outcome relating to universal healthcare coverage for all South Africans. Under this outcome, one of these interventions was to improve the quality of primary healthcare services through the implementation of this program, the ICRM program. It states that 100% of the primary healthcare facilities across South Africa must have attained or maintained their ideal clinic status by 2024. In order to achieve this, the provincial departments of health across the country included the ideal clinic status rate as one of their key performance indicators and targets, and that was sitting in 2023. 59% of the primary healthcare facilities in South Africa had achieved their ideal clinic status, and this is what was reported by the different provincial departments. Through our audits on performance information, which our job is not to profess on whether there's good performance or bad performance. Our job is not even to opine on a policy. Our job is merely to say the information that is being presented to those that must assess performance, is it reliable? Our job is to give assurance on whether there is credibility on that information. In the same way as we do on financial information, we do that for performance information. Is this information reliable? Can the person using it to assess performance, to course correct, to support, can that person rely on it? So what we did was that through our audits of these departments of health across the country, we looked at whether or not what they were reporting is credible, so that whoever uses their report can rely on that report or not. The audit of Limpopo is not yet completed, as I indicated when I did the outcomes. So we're unable to articulate a message on that. If you look at this slide, it tells you that the Western Cape has reported that 81% of their clinics have achieved the ideal status. If you look at Gauteng, it tells you that they've reported 97% has been attained. We've been able, through audit evidence, to confirm that that information is credible. So Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, we can confirm that the information that they are putting out is correct. The trouble here, and this is why we did this work, the trouble here is that in KZN, in Northwest, in Northern Cape and Mpumalanga, we were unable to obtain enough audit evidence to confirm whether what they are reporting as having been achieved is reliable. So we are unable to say whether Mpumalanga has attained this 81% that they are reporting on. Similarly, we are unable to say whether the 93% in KZN has been attained. Now, with an ambition as important as that for South Africa, with the allocation of resources and with the designation and allocation of these responsibilities, we are moving in the journey towards improving the quality of the facilities at the primary healthcare level. And I guess on the next slide, we then, that was just an example of one of the reasons why we do this work. Thank you. As you know, over many years, we've reported on how performance information tends to not get the attention it deserves. There's more attention paid to financial information and not so much to performance information. The PFMA is very clear. Accounting officers and accounting authority have to compile quality financial information, and they have to compile quality performance information. That remains their primary responsibility. And they need to do so with the support of their senior managers, with the support of internal audit and audit committees. Our job as AGSA is to look at that information and confirm whether or not it is credible. The processes that underpin performance information, planning, monitoring, and reporting, those processes are well designed, moving from the National Development Plan to the MTSF to the annual performance plans of different entities and departments, who then must report on a quarterly basis to the executive authority and even to the legislature on how they are performing. And on an annual basis, they give us a report which we confirm the credibility thereof, which then reaches the oversight machinery. And the APPs and the APRs, those are prepared in accordance with frameworks that have already been set and legislated on, with guidelines that are clear. Ours is to assess whether or not in preparing that information and presenting that information, those frameworks have been complied with, and whether that information is credible. We don't judge whether or not performance is good. Ours is to say if the information can be relied upon. And yes, I'm aware I'm saying it for a second time. Without credible, regular...
Maybe it's based on the challenge you have. So the emphasis is that don't think that we are after you on your performance.
Yes.
We are checking on reliability of information.
Yes.
So that's the point that you want to emphasize.
Yes, Chair. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. There are a lot of instances where we have to reiterate this point, and maybe it's because as AGSA we've decided to start looking more deeply at this area to give better insight and to use what we know to influence better decisions within the system. And so our report's starting to look very different, and some people start to ask, but why are you doing this? What is all this? And all it is, we have to keep reminding our auditees, it is about confirmation of credibility. Over many years, we've been saying that performance information doesn't get the attention it deserves. One of the key indicators is the quality of performance information that's submitted to us. At the beginning of the audit, the majority of accounting officers and accounting authority submits financial that is not credible. Through the audit process, when we find misstatements, they then correct them and then are able to publish better performance reports. That's fine to publish a credible performance report at the end of the day. But our issue is this: accounting officers, internal audit and audit committees must worry about performance information right across the year. Because if they don't have a credible year-end report, it means they don't have a credible quarterly report. So they are not able to monitor performance in different sections of that institution. They are not able to course correct as things change, and they are unable to assess how performance has run in different departments that they are responsible for. Some of the things that we've raised over the years have been that there are inadequate systems to collate information. So some of the issues are about manual processes that are quite onerous. We believe that the invitation is for investment to be put in place by accounting officers to ensure they can collate the information that's required. Not to opt out of doing the work, but to rather be seized with saying, how do I, as accounting officer who's responsible for credible performance information, how do I put in systems that allow me to get there? We're seeing that there isn't enough attention to that. And as a result, what some accounting officers will do is they'll say, if they can't give us credible credible performance information or credible evidence on what they're reporting, they simply take out some of these indicators because they don't want an audit finding. So they'll say, well, I don't want an AG finding that says my report is not credible, so I'm taking this out and I'm going to manage my performance off the books. It's not going to form part of my annual performance plan or my annual performance report, which goes into Parliament. That's a problem, because if you do not have a credible, complete performance plan and report, it's going to be difficult to assess whether or not the resources that are being allocated are adequate. because there are things happening elsewhere outside of the budget, and outside of the performance, and that also compromises transparency. It also compromises accountability. We've also seen that even the indicators and targets that are supposed to happen to be cascaded to different provinces through the sectors, where there's disagreement, accounting officers take those out instead of agreeing amongst each other on how we're going to track something that's important to all of us in education, all of us in health. And as I've said, we find that audit committees and internal auditors don't spend enough time and attention on this area. They worry about the debits and credits and not so much about this. And we would also indicate to you that we're seeing executive authorities and portfolio committees also not paying enough attention to this area. They do worry about financial information, but not enough about this. Fortunately, stemming from a number of years of doing this and engaging with different stakeholders, we're now working much more closely with the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation in reviewing the drafts of annual performance plans and sharing our insights with them so that the quality of the performance plans can start to improve. And I do hope that within the parliamentary system, you're starting to see the benefit of that collaboration between ourselves and DPME. This slide, honourable members, sets out some examples of what happens when the weaknesses in performance planning, monitoring and reporting are not attended to. We find that the information that is reported is not reliable. So, for example, in the Department of Public Works, one of their targets related to making savings or registering savings on the amount of money that they were spending on private leases. You'll know that over the last 2 audit cycles, we've highlighted this area of very expensive private leases that are entered into within that sector. We've even issued material irregularities on financial losses being incurred because the market rate is so much lower than the rate being paid to some of these private lessors. So the target within the department was to say, we will save 100 million rand. We will save, that's our target, we will save 100 million rand on private leases. So we think it's good that they're attending to this, right? And then they report that they've achieved 165 million rand. If that is true, we would want to be able to applaud them, because then they've overrun the target. The problem is that as AGSA, we are unable to offer any assurance on the reliability of that information, because the information that was given to us was not supported by evidence, so we can confirm that it's credible. So for yourselves, as the honourable members that must now oversee the performance of the department, you are left without information that allows you to assess whether or not what is being reported is credible. Important targets, such as the creation of jobs. Similarly, in the Department of Transport, there was a target of creating 10,000 jobs. The reported achievement was 11,000 jobs. And unfortunately, we were unable to confirm the reliability of it. And you'll see on that slide also similar matters relating to significant achievements that are reported around the maintenance of roads or patching potholes in different provinces. And we would want to be able to applaud what is being done, but the problem is we are unable to confirm the reliability of it. Some of the things we're seeing is that key performance indicators are taken out. As I indicated on the last slide, some of the things are now being managed off the books, they'll say. But it's important things, such as the delivery of textbooks. In no less than 4 provincial departments of education, this indicator of delivering textbooks was simply taken out of the annual performance report, because accounting officers said, no, I don't want an AG finding on reliability. Now, if we appreciate what performance information is supposed to be helping us do, which is to ensure that the things we set out in our MTSF and prioritize as we allocate budgets and resources, those things are being done. When you've got 4 provincial accounting officers taking out these targets because they say, I don't want an AG finding on reliability, you have no way of really tracking whether what they ever say to anybody in terms of attainment of those targets is credible. and then it takes many, many years to figure out that it wasn't being done, or you have to rely on anecdotal stories of textbooks not being delivered. Another example of what happens when performance planning, monitoring, and reporting are not properly attended to. We see that there may be a target that is reported to have been achieved at a certain level, and the budget is spent, and there's a big mismatch. So in provincial education departments, what we looked at was infrastructure development. And there was a target that was set, and then the reported achievement was ultimately cut, and it was not adequate to meet the intended objectives. But there may be something else going on. Maybe the money is going to something else that's off the books. But say without information, you're unable to assess whether or not there are adequate resources being put to this particular imperative. Similarly, something as important as providing district health services. The people doing the work there may be doing everything they're supposed to do and achieving this target of 51%. But then they've spent 100% of the budget. Now, we're not sure if the problem is the budget, or the problem is the target, or the problem is the achievement. In an environment where we have to be seized with making difficult decisions about how to allocate scarce resources, it's crucial that this area of performance planning, resource allocation, performance monitoring be strengthened. Without that, we are also not going to be able to drive the transparency we need to give credibility to our decisions on how we allocate resources. We're also not going to be able to have information to assess whether or not performance is happening at the right level. The last thing I'll say on performance information, as an example, is that when we ignore performance information, we're also not able to assess whether we're meeting our targets, such as when we're dealing with the matter of attaining ideal clinic status, which I spoke about just now. In the report, it said we've achieved 59%, and yet the target was 100% to be achieved in a year's time. So over 4 years, we've got to 59%. We're supposed to get to 100% by 2024. If we don't have credible information, we're not sure what to course correct and when. You almost wait until you get to the end of 5 years and say, where are we? And especially in a world where we operate with all sorts of surprises. When the MTSF target was set, there was no COVID even being thought of at the time. There were no floods thought of at the time. There was no July unrest and many other surprises and crises that hit us. So perhaps there were decisions made about what to prioritize and when, and that's fine. The trouble is if we don't have credible information, what we've done, we're unable to give confidence about the choices we've made and to communicate convincingly with citizens on what they can expect going forward. And maybe another example would be the one on the title deeds, which is the registration of title deeds, a very important election promise that was made by this administration, and it was also an important outcome placed in the MTSF. 4 years in, we are at 12% of attaining what we had set as a target of just over 1 million title deeds to be registered. So it would mean that there would have to be significant catch-up between now and the end of 2024 financial year if we are going to achieve what we set as a primary target. Again, as for us, it's not so much about an adverse audit finding if there's not achievement of these targets. Ours is about the credibility of the information so that those that must make decisions have the benefit of credible information. The next slide, honorable members, we share with you as an example of the type of work that Team AJSA has been able to do. You'll know that over time we've invested in a...
Sorry? Members say those who are veteran have lost you.
They've lost us.
Technical expertise. Check.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's important because this has been published as... that's it?
I would have to
Are you managing at the back? Sound. Network. Can you afford you a 5 minute break so that you can deal with the problem?
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's coming now? Yeah. Okay. Honorable Matuba? Hayi, siyakuva ngoku. Uva njani? Utshela usithi not yet audible. But you are responding to this. Honorable Singh? Honorable Singh? I'm catching him from somewhere, not directly on the what's the. Okay, they are responding in any event. Yeah, we can pick up that you are fine, Honorable Singh. Thank you very much. Okay, AG, back to you. Our
Okay.
apologies. Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Chair. So on the previous slide, it was simply some examples of what happens when the attention that's required for performance planning, monitoring, and reporting is not adequate. We were trying to just give some practical examples of what happens on the ground around reliability of performance information, incompleteness of performance information and indicators that are sitting in the annual performance plans, matters around monitoring performance, resource allocation decisions that are not being informed by credible information. And we were also highlighting that over time, the ability to meet our state goals and ambitions. The next slide, which I must start by acknowledging that when we met with the honourable members and yourself, honourable chair, about 2 years ago to deal with some strategic planning, and we shared with you that we were focusing more on value chains, taking advantage of the fact that we audit across the system. We audit departments, national and provincial. We audit entities. We wanted to start looking across the system. Your guidance to us was, yes, that was good, but do focus on data. And it was one of the things that you challenged us on to say, we'd like to see you do more work in the area of data analytics. What we're able to share with you is an example of the type of thing we've been able to do. So we've picked out the higher education and training portfolio, not because we want to pick on it, but because it's a good example of the type of insight that Team HSA is able to deliver. We audit in that entire sector. We audit all of the CETAs, all 21 of them. We audit the Department for Higher Education and Training. We audit the National Skills Fund. We audit the NISFAS, and we also audit all of the TVET colleges, which was a take-on project that we started about 10 years ago. Whilst we don't audit the 26 universities, we do have a line of sight on their audits. All of that helps us to see entities not in their silos, but to see across the value chain. So what we've done, we ran some data analytics across the TVET sector because we audit all of them. And we said, what can we see around opportunities to improve the quality of spend? Because South Africa invests significantly in this sector. And we all hope that the investments we're making are going to help young people realize their own dreams and ambitions, but equip them to participate in the economy with skills that are relevant for today and importantly for tomorrow, and skills that are designed to help us meet our own economic growth ambitions as a country. So we said, okay, what's happening in the TVET sectors? Let's look at the top 10 courses for which students have enrolled within TVETs. So what we found was that if you look at that the dark blue bar, we found that the majority of students in TVET colleges have enrolled for studies in engineering, which is a good thing. Then we said, okay, what else are they registering for? We found that tourism shows up as a significant area of enrollment. But we also found probably the next highest would be office administration. So we started to ask the question, does this link with the skills that South Africa needs tomorrow? Because these young people will come out of that sector and enter the workplace, hopefully. Then we said, what is NSFAS doing? To what extent is the investment that NSFAS make consistent with these ambitions for what skills we need? So we took the data and we superimposed it on the bursaries that are being given by NSFAS and checked what are these students that are funded by NSFAS registered for in these TVET colleges. And again, that's the benefit of auditing the entire sector. So what we found was that tourism is the highest representation in terms of the sector where NSFAS funds students at TVET. The next lot is office administration. NSFAS funds a high number of students that go into courses on office administration in TVET colleges. Nothing wrong with those two courses, but the question is to what extent are they linked to the critical skills that we've highlighted as being required for the future. And what we see are opportunities for us to start correcting that, because if we don't do it, we're going to waste significant opportunity and we're not going to get a good return on the investment that we're making in that sector. Another piece of work that we did was to look at the CETAs, because we audit all of them. And they tend to operate in silos. We have the benefit of now being able to look across these institutions. And what we found was that among CETAs, there's a duplication of effort. There are learners, individuals who are part of learnership programs at multiple CETAs at the same time. And that was never the intention. The idea was that you go into a learnership program and then you articulate into the workplace. What we're finding is that at the same time, somebody will be in multiple CETAs. So they're double dipping. At the same time, somebody will be at multiple CETAs or at CETA, at NSFAS, and at Funzali Shaka as a beneficiary. Now, those were meant to be discrete programs where individuals participate and move on to the next thing. Yes, you could blame the learners, but the reality is many of them don't get other jobs, so this becomes a way of generating income. What's critical is that the CETAs themselves start to operate differently and not just as silos, so that they can minimize this duplication. We've also seen that there are learners who are on a learnership from a CETA, but then when we check their ID number at Home Affairs, that ID number is not there, which begs the question of who are these individuals that are being funded. Worryingly, we also found learners who are on a learnership program getting a stipend, but then are deceased at the Department of Home Affairs, which asks some significant questions about key inefficiencies within that process. So crucial that the database integration, the collaboration and coordination within the sector be attended to. Anecdotally, many of us have heard about learners who are in multiple CETAs at the same time. Here, through the work of Team HSA, we're able to give you the statistics. No less than 23,000 of them are in multiple CETAs at the same time. So the matter is quite pressing, because that's significant inefficiency effort that needs to be pushed back. And the journey, we believe, is about making sure we get optimal quality of spend and optimal benefit to citizens within the country. We believe that these insights which we share on this sector, this very crucial for our economy, crucial for our Human Development Index, crucial for individual lives, we believe that this insight can help those that run the institutions, that oversee the sector, do so even better. We've done similar analyses for other sectors, and I'm hoping that through the different portfolio committees where you participate, you're starting to see these insights because members of Team AGSA have been so energized by this work. And you would have seen many of my dynamic and smart colleagues presenting to you on matters similar to this. A message in our general report this year, just like we did last year, relates to what we've termed pressure on the fiscus. And the central message is this. When you've got fiscal pressure and economic growth problems as we have, it becomes ever more important to ensure that the resources we do have available are being spent in the best possible way. It's ever more urgent that we push back on the things that deal with duplication, leakage, but also just wastage. And the wastage that we've been able to report on over time, we see persists in different areas. Either poor payment practices, we pay suppliers late and incur penalties and interest, we pay for goods that we've not received or that are of poor quality, we duplicate payments and overpay. All of those things we need to start pushing back on urgently. We've also seen losses resulting where the procurement processes end up with appointing suppliers who are overcharging, so we don't get the most cost-effective options. We're seeing instances of these sub-commercial lease arrangements in the leasing sector with private leases, where government ultimately overpays for the buildings they do occupy. Software licenses where there are payments and yet those licenses are not being used. We've also raised matters on the infrastructure aspects, where standing time is being paid and that's not part of the contract, or contractors are being paid when they are not even on site anymore, and also the poor maintenance of infrastructure. All that is to say that these things we've been seeing as financial losses when we do our audits tell us that there is significant opportunity for the public sector to improve the quality of spend, to start safeguarding resources and push back on the wastage that is becoming more and more evident. We've also highlighted that the borrowing programs of state-owned entities do put pressure on the fiscus, and we need to keep finding ways to stem the growing pressure on the fiscus arising from those entities. Another key feature that is putting pressure on government finances, you recall we talked about that last year, which is the claims against government departments, particularly in the healthcare sector, relating to medico-legal claims. At the moment, the number is sitting at 68 billion rand, which is a burden to departments of health, who then have to take out money from the service delivery budget to settle those claims. Crucial that we limit instances where claims will arise. Also crucial that we manage claims properly when they do arise, putting in place the key disciplines of document management and of settling quickly, fairly and quickly, so that we don't run with costs that ultimately end up as wastage. I know that by the time we get to this part of the presentation, your questions would be, okay, so what have you done, AG? And so I get to that part. With the amendments to the Public Audit Act, which we're reporting on the MI process, the honourable members will recall that we started this journey with very small number of entities in PFMA. We started with 16 in 2019. We've now been implementing this instrument, getting better and better at it. Where we are is that in PFMA, we've identified a total of 266 material irregularities. Those, the majority relate to instances of financial loss that is incurred mostly in the area of procurement, is where we've seen fraud, suspicions of fraud. Some of the MIs relate to harm to the public. So an example would be where we see them completed and it's not yet been handed over to the beneficiaries. There's an example that I keep saying to the team at AGSA that will stay in my own heart for a very long time. In one of the provinces, the team was auditing the books as they do. They saw that on the books there is an asset of an investment in a neonatal ICU ward. And so they could have ended there and said, okay, does it exist? Was it paid for? Is it correctly shown in the books? But they didn't stop there. They said, we want to go and actually see this facility. It was installed 6 years ago, and it's been in the books for 6 years. We want to go and see it. So off they went to go and look at this thing. They found that the facility was not being used. So they started to ask certain questions of the accounting officer around, but why are we not using this facility? And the answer came and said, no, we haven't hired the people, the specialist nurses and doctors that can treat babies that need this level of care. And so in the sort of audit query processes, the team then arrived at a view that actually this is a material irregularity. It might not be financial loss because the assets are there, the equipment is there, but it is substantial harm to the public because they're not benefiting from the investment that has been put in place. It's also misuse of a material public resource because you're not using this investment, this public investment, to benefit the community. Fortunately, in that instance, 6 years later, the accounting officer went to fill those vacancies that were there, and now that neonatal ICU ward is operational, and the babies in that community can have a chance of surviving. So those are the type of matters that will not show up in the rands and cents we tell you about the material financial loss, but they do show you about the problems we see in the system, but importantly, how this instrument is helping us contribute to remedying some of these problems. 240 of these MIs are material financial loss related. That total loss has been estimated at 14 billion rand. Because accounting officers tend to act when we raise these MIs, reporting matters to law enforcement by responding in the way that they should. As a consequence of the MI process and the responsiveness of accounting officers, we can now indicate to the honourable members that 1.29 billion rand of financial losses have been recovered. 500 million rand of financial losses have been prevented through contract cancellations, and 700 million rand of financial loss is in the process of being recovered. A total of that is 2.5 billion rand of resource protection that comes out of the effort of Team AGSA using this instrument. Remember, I said that financial loss was estimated at 14 billion rand, and if you compare it to 2.5 billion rand of recovery, it's a pretty big gap. What it tells us is that, yes, it's good that the MI process is working, that the efforts of Team AGSA are bringing money back into the fiscus, but it can never be the adequate solution to our problems. There has to be attention to preventing the problems in the first instance, and then also acting as soon as problems arise. And that is the duty of accounting officers. So whilst we celebrate that our team, whose audit bill into the fiscus every year is now 4.5 billion rand, has now contributed to resource protection to the tune of 2.5 billion rand. We also quickly assert that it is urgent that accounting officers act on these matters even before their MIs. Because the matters are really things we've reported on before. It's procurement management, payment management, resource management, revenue management, interest and penalties, things that are not that complex to deal with if there were proper attention to ensuring that there are preventative controls. I'm now getting to the end of my presentation, honourable members. I've talked about the audit outcomes, the performance information, and given you a flavour for how we've dealt with it differently this time, looking at projects, looking at programs, and I hope that that message has become quite clear. I've also shared with you what we've achieved using the MI process. But if you look at the whole, those remain the same. We've got to address this culture of no accountability and consequences. Can't rely purely on the audit process and the MI process to address consequence management. It's urgent that all in the accountability ecosystem be seized with this on an ongoing basis. We're also seeing that there's still ineffective resource management and resource protection. That needs attention across all levels within the accountability ecosystem. We've also seen that there is inadequate intergovernmental planning and coordination and support, which needs attention if we are to improve the quality of what we spend throughout this sector. Our recommendations, you would have heard before, relate to implementing the professionalization framework that was approved by Cabinet just about a year ago. With it will come instances of putting people in public institutions in those key leadership and stewardship responsibilities, people of competence, people who work conscientiously, people who operate with a sense of public service and with the right sort of ethical disposition. And we'll be able to hold them accountable. If we do that, the public sector will start to look differently, will start to perform very differently. We've put in our recommendations the need for executive authorities and committees in Parliament and the legislatures to worry much more about performance information for the reasons I set out when I was presenting that aspect. We've also highlighted that the coordinating departments, the coordinating institutions, whether it's the DPME, the National Treasury, they need to improve their own intergovernmental planning and coordination so that we can start to get to a much better level of integration across the system. And then maybe the last thing which we want to also see how we can contribute to, which is to improve the effectiveness of audit committees and internal audit functions across government, who really have tremendous potential to contribute much more impactfully in the accountability ecosystem. If we do these things, honorable members and honorable chairs, we believe that we'll be able to improve the quality of spend, and we'll be able to start closing the confidence gap between public institutions and the people that they're meant to serve. Thank you very much. I've now come to the end of my presentation. The report is being tabled today, and it'll become, I'm sure it's available to you now. And of course, over the next couple of days, we'll be talking to different people about it as well. But I now formally hand back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.